and for giving up your time for the first of our 4 Raising a Reader webinar sessions that are running over the next week. Do let us know where in the world that you're joining us from in the chat box. I can see people putting messages in already. Hello, India. Please do let us know where you're joining us from and what time of day it is. I'm sure there's a big range. 9 p.m. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. So a big thank you to Charlotte Rance for hosting the session. Some of you may know Charlotte from our previous webinars that we've run, particularly for Snappy Sounds. Charlotte is an author, a teacher trainer and a consultant, and she will be hosting our Raising a Reader webinars this week. So the session will run for an hour, and at the end of the session you will automatically receive a certificate to your email address, and then in the next 24 hours or so we'll send you a link to watch again and the slides from the presentation to share with your colleagues. And yeah, please do use the chat box. Pop any questions you have in the chat box. The more engagement we have, the better. And yes, hello everyone. Great to see so many people on here from all over the world. It's amazing. Brilliant. Without further ado, I think I'll pass on to Charlotte and enjoy the session. But yeah, please do use the chat box and you can get the most out of the session for engaging with the chat box and asking any questions you may have. And yeah, enjoy, and I'll see you later on.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Excellent. I have to remember not to lean back too far in my chair, otherwise my face disappears and you can only see this much of me. How are we all this evening, this morning, this afternoon, whatever time it is with you? It's great to see lots of different wonderful countries represented in our chat box. And for those of you that are up late at night, well done for staying awake. For those of you that were up super early just to join a webinar, congratulations to you. I do think you're slightly crazy. It is 4:30 in the afternoon here in Brighton, so not too bad for me. And we are here to talk about raising readers. So, to get us started, I'm going to show you a quote. I'd like you to tell me in the chat box if you agree or disagree with that quote. So you can give me an A in the chat box if you agree, and you can give me a D in the chat box if you disagree, and tell me why. So here is our little quote. Oh, now my thing's not working. Deary me, let's do it that way. There we go. There's no such thing as a kid who hates reading. Agree or disagree? I like this quote. It's from James Patterson, who's an author. He writes crime books. We've got a few. All right. No such thing as a kid that hates reading. We've got some A's, we've got some D's. Okay. Now, while my A's and D's are coming in, let's get some reasons in here. For those of you that agree, why do you agree? For those of you that disagree, why do you disagree? Agree, they just don't know the value of it yet. Okay, that's good. All right. It needs to be fostered, but you agree. Fantastic. If a child has difficulty reading, he won't like it. Absolutely. They don't necessarily know how to. All right. Okay. Does anybody know? Can anyone figure out what the end of this quote might be? So James Patterson starts this quote saying, "There's no such thing as a kid who hates reading." How might this quote finish? Some interesting points coming out. So, some children love reading different kinds of text. So maybe, here we go. All right, there's another one from MedTup who says there's a kid who hasn't found the right book. Maybe. Okay, they don't have enough practice. If they're not taught to read with enjoyment, I think that's a really valuable point. If there's a teacher who hasn't taught them well, maybe they haven't found the right book yet. Let's see. There we are. So I think James Patterson agrees with quite a few of you. There's no such thing as a kid who hates reading. There are kids who love reading and kids who are reading the wrong books. And I agree with that personally. I think quite a few of you might as well. Yeah, we need support and encouragement. Now, a couple of people have said that, children love reading, and many children do. But what everybody is saying about the support and the encouragement is absolutely true. I have always loved reading. I've been a book addict since I was a child. My Saturday morning treat was my mum taking me to the library and helping me select some new books. Like that was the most exciting part of my week. But as Najwa says, we have to know what kind of books they enjoy reading and how to help them have fun in reading. Not everyone likes to read the same things. So, our session for today, we are going to be focusing on three key areas. First of all, reading skills, what they are, why they matter. Why are we even here? What is this whole week of sessions all about? And then we're going to be asking the question of, okay, if there are right books and wrong books, how do we know? What should children be reading? And then we're going to end by thinking a little bit about some of the barriers that children feel and find when they are reading and learning to read. Lovely, lovely, lovely answers coming out in the chat books as well. Bedtime stories give encouragement. That is so true. And we're going to come we have a whole session this week. Our final session is all about that school home connection and how we can get parents involved and how we can support parents to encourage that love of reading as well. And we will be talking a bit about bedtime stories then. So let's start with a quote that is taken from an article in the Innovation Journal, and it was taken a long time ago. I would imagine we are possibly in a situation where there are one or two teachers in this chat room that are the same age as this quote. If any of you teachers were born in the year 2000 and you are as old as this quote, do let me know. I need to get some I need to get access to some more more recent quotes. I have more recent quotes, I promise. But the reason this quote is still here is because it's still true. So, this is a quote, as I say, back from 2000, December 2000, where the research shows that when it comes to any sort of study, right from the primary age, right the way through to university level, right the way beyond that, students who read a lot and who understand what they read are usually getting better grades. Um, yeah, this is a consistent thing. We see this evidence time and time again. There is a consistent connection between reading proficiency and academic success. So, as teachers, we have a vested interest in encouraging children to read and to learn to read. If they are able to read effectively, they will get better results. But that is not the only reason. It's right there on our little circle, on our little diagram here, we've got a number of different reasons as well. So, what I would like you to do in the chat box, which of these seven reasons for reading matters the most to you as a teacher? which of these 7 things is most important? Like, if you want the children in your classrooms to read, what is your main reason for that? I've got 7 good benefits of literacy in English. So we've got vocabulary building, ability to access other subjects, to open doors around the world, to improve spoken fluency, to improve written accuracy, to build learner autonomy, and of course, as we've already established, to get the exam results up as well. I don't think for most teachers, exam results are our primary reason. I think we like to encourage reading, as many of you are saying, because they build vocabulary, because it builds autonomy. We want our students to be, you know, completely autonomous, don't we? To be able to go and use all of the tools in their learning portfolio, in their pocket, to be successful. Yeah, quite a few of you are saying, access to other subjects. This comes through reading. If you're able to read effectively as English teachers, we were going to say in English, we will get lots more access to everything we need. The internet, for better or worse, a lot of it's in English. It contains a whole world of things. If students are able to effectively navigate reading in English, then they can gain access to other things. They can pick up books. It's another tool in there. But quite a few people saying vocabulary building, and I think that's really important as well. The more you read, the better your vocabulary. There is a very strong connection between those two. And we're going to talk a little bit about vocabulary building today because there are certain things that we need to consider when it comes to building vocabulary. So many people saying all of them. All of them are the most important. Mhm. I know it feels like that often when we're in the classroom, doesn't it? Um, Another one that matters a lot to me is it improves written accuracy, and I think that reading and writing, to me, they are very connected. If you write something, it will be read. If you read something, it has been written. There is a connection. Seeing that model when we're reading, it all goes in subconsciously. It starts building up our ability to writing. And I think that for students, writing is probably the thing they least like doing in the classroom. Don't know if you agree with me. It's certainly true for my students. Like, why are we writing? Can't we do some speaking instead? But we need our writing practice as well. Lots of reading makes writing better. Another one that frequency came out is opening doors, and that's absolutely true. And it's true of literacy generally, whether that's your L1 or your L2 or your L3 or even your L27, if you like, whatever language you can read in, literacy opens doors to different things. Someone's asking if there is a recording. There will be a recording sent to you afterwards. Okay, so we've got a few good reasons to be looking at reading skills and why they matter. But what are they? What are these reading skills? So, if we want our students to improve their vocabulary, have access to all these other subjects, improve their speaking, improve their writing, build their autonomy, improve their exam results, and open doors to a wider world, what are the actual skills we need to teach them? Like when we say reading skills, what does that mean? Someone has already mentioned developing phonetic skills. Absolutely. Comprehension. Yes, there's an important skill there. We've got phonics coming in. Fantastic. Reading fluency. Yes, 100%. Not just reading, but reading at speed and reading to understand at speed. Critical thinking skills, absolutely. Skimming and scanning, some of our classroom tools coming out here. These are very important. Reading aloud to improve fluency. Ooh, an interesting one. I think that, reading aloud Very challenging, the classroom. We're going to talk about this a bit later. Some teachers love it, some teachers hate it, some teachers think it's not beneficial, other teachers think it's really useful. Um, I I I think quite in the middle. I don't do much reading out loud in classrooms, but I do use it. I think that when it's used effectively, it's a very, very beneficial tool. But I think that there is, many things that we have to take into account. Silent reading, that's an interesting skill and an important one that we don't often think about. But thank you for mentioning it. Learning about authors, learning about parts of the book, so being able to not only sort of think critically about what's in the materials, but also about what the purpose of the book is, who the author is, etc. Reading improves concentration, for sure. For sure. And there's nothing like getting lost in a good book. Prediction, picture sequencing, absolutely. All right. Lots and lots of brilliant ideas coming in. Let's break them down then. So I have highlighted four general areas that we can talk about when we're talking about reading skills. So the first of those, as many of you have mentioned, is decoding. That comes from our um, ability to look at a selection of letters to then read them. It's the mechanics of reading. So understanding the sounds that individual letters make, understanding what happens when we put certain letters together. So TH not being, it's not critical to hinking, it's critical thinking. We've got a combination there. So decoding, being able to break down the letters in a word to know what that word is. Skill number one. For some students, more challenging than other students. Some some people would say that in some languages it's more challenging than in others. I think one of the most challenging languages to try and decode in is English. Um, I constantly apologize to the students I have for the crazy spelling in my language. It's a very important skill, but it's not everything. um, Phonics on its own isn't enough. Phonics on its own will not necessarily uh, teach comprehension. Comprehension is the ability to read and understand what it is. Now, someone in the chat box, Shameen, has asked, would critical thinking come with comprehension? Not necessarily. We can talk about levels of comprehension. So at the very top, there's literal comprehension, understanding that sort of direct meaning of what is being written down. So, see the letters, CAT, decode the letters to make at, comprehend the letters to make the animal cat come alive. But comprehension doesn't stop there. We know, someone's already mentioned, um, with the idea of analyzing between the lines. There's much deeper levels of comprehension as well, isn't there? So not just the basics. And when it comes to whether critical thinking and comprehension come in together, yes and no. Yes, it does, but only at the deeper end of comprehension. And quite often, especially in a primary classroom, this can be an element that gets left out. We're so focused on the understanding of the language and the understanding of the sentence that maybe we don't take all of those critical thinking skills into consideration as well. So critical thinking comes out because it is an important reading skill. Being able to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of this text that I am reading? Who wrote it? Why did they write it? Did they write it to change my mind about something? Did they write it to argue their position? Did they write it to make us question? All of these different elements that we need to take in as part of deeper comprehension that are full critical thinking skills. And then, of course, we've already mentioned reading fluency. Now, we talk a little bit about, oh, she's a good reader, he's a good reader, oh, he's not very good at reading. And often what we're talking about there is fluency. There is a strong sort of goal for readers to be able to read read and read well, read quickly, retain information, and get that done without constant interruption, without needing to look things up in a dictionary, um, without needing to stop and reread too much. Yeah, to be able to get inside the story, reading with proper pause and intonation, so knowing where to stop, that all comes into reading fluency as well. And all of these skills are skills that we need to learn. If you put a baby in a room with a book and leave the baby in the room with the book until the baby is 5 years old, that baby will not automatically learn to read. Um, we don't automatically learn to read. It's not sort of one of our genetically programmed abilities. We learn to walk. That is a natural process that happens. We learn to speak and to make sounds. That is a natural process that happens. Learning to read is very much a learnt progress. Now, someone did ask in the chat box whether I can talk a little bit about decoding and encoding. I'm not going to do that today. However, there are lots and lots and lots of useful webinars that have been on that subject. So if you are interested in learning more about decoding and encoding the phonics, then I'm sure that if you have a chat with Macmillan, they can direct you towards some very useful recordings of previous webinars that will go into that in a bit more detail. For today, what I'm going to say is that decoding is breaking down letters into a meaningful word. So, understanding what this lump of letters is together, breaking it down and giving it meaning by being able to understand what it means. And encoding is the opposite of that. So, reading skills, why they matter. We've got through that one a little bit. Let's move on to a question. It's a question for you. So, I suppose the first question ought to be, do you like reading? um, but I have made a big assumption when I have a room full of teachers. I think it's fair to say that the majority of us probably like reading something. So, in the chat box, what do you personally, not in the classroom, not in your job, in your day to day life, what do you like reading? Sarah, straight in. Anything that catches your attention. Yeah, I do that too. And I have a tendency to read road signs. I like reading road signs. And I do it in all sorts of different countries as well. Few people saying short stories, few people saying good authors. Um, metaphysics texts. Not on my personal reading. Historical novels. Okay, anything in your topic of interest? Detective stories. I like a detective story. The latest news. Poems, novels, positive quotes. Ooh, fictional stories. Okay, cool. What does this tell me? Khaled, gossip. I'm glad you're honest. My best friend is completely addicted to reading about gossip. She likes to keep me updated. It means I don't need to read it. Self-help books. Oh, very nice. Social issues, positive quotes. Brilliant. Lots of different some things. Oh, rumors about actors. Fabulous. Why not? Thrillers. Excellent. Biographies. Look at this. What does this tell us? What does this tell us? Well, this tells us that we are all individuals with different interests. What I like, I like predominantly fiction. I read a lot more fiction than I read non-fiction. Sun's changed position. Let me move my camera. I'm starting to look like some sort of glowing ghost. There we go. Um, I like fiction. I don't read a lot of poetry. I wish I read poetry, but I don't. Um, Oh, and Sarah makes such a great point there. Reading is not just limited to books. So I often read, well, we've already mentioned the signs that I like to read. I find, what else do I read that's not books? Oh, text messages, all of them, all the time. Text messages and emails. I read a lot of those. I don't always enjoy them. Um, Comics, amazing, fabulous. My husband likes to read comics. Poetry and fiction. Yeah. Yeah. We all like different things. And the same is true of our students. I could have this discussion forever, but we should probably move on. It's like, oh, tell me about your favorite authors. My husband loves comics as well. Ah, yeah, there we go. It's good. I'm just happy I have a husband that reads. Um, so here's a question. What should children read? Six titles there. Six titles there. First question then. As a teacher, which of these would you pick for your classroom and why? Oh, Fabiana, I understand that one. You tried to read Shakespeare, you find it too difficult as it's old English. I love Shakespeare. But don't feel bad about it. I was probably the only child in my class that enjoyed Shakespeare. We are a minority. Even in first language, the language is a challenge. Okay. Oh, so Elephant King's been a popular one. Why is that? Someone saying based on their interest, you're letting them choose. Fantastic. Wild animals. Second one, few people have chosen Grandpa Bruno. My children like science. Good. We've got a reason. Fantastic. Science interest. Choosing the turtle book. Fantastic. Now, as we've said, there's a few things that we need to take into consideration when we're choosing what children need to read. We've mentioned their interests. Kristin has also come in with knowing their level, and absolutely, that's very, very true. We're going to talk a little bit about levels shortly. So, we need to ensure that when we're choosing the right books for children, number one, that we are not doing all of the choosing. They need to have a lot of options for themselves. So we need to figure out what they're interested in. Is it something that they're interested in reading? The only way to do that is to give the children choice and to let the children choose for themselves. We've also mentioned there are things that we need to take into consideration in terms of age. Is the book age appropriate? You know, uh, is is a 10-year-old likely to be interested in a story about a lizard from outer space? A lot of 10-year-olds, yes. At that age, we're starting to discover that there is a world beyond our world. So it's often a time of interest. We also need to take into account whether things are culturally respectful, culturally friendly. Um, I know a few of you have chosen The Elephant King. The reason I put that one up there is that this is a folk tale from India. Now, to me, as a girl who grew up in the UK, where we have different folk tales, I love to read folk stories from around the world. So for me, as a person, this is the first book I would choose. gives me an option to learn about different histories, different oral histories, different fables and things that we have learnt. Yeah, and of course, it's all well and good reading a book about farming, but does that book about farming teach you about your own culture and your own background of farming? Is it something that is true in your country? So we can talk about culture in terms of learning about different cultures, but also in terms of giving and providing information about the culture that the children are growing up in as well, and learning more about our own cultures as well as others. All right, second question for you then. We've all said which one we'd choose, and I think a lot of us agreed that we'd probably give them all six and make sure that they have a nice selection to choose their own. Which of these do you most want to read? Mine was, as you just heard, The Elephant King and the Rabbit, just because I like lots of excellent stories from different cultures. If you had to pick one up, if you've got a very short train ride, 30 minutes, what are you going to read? Liliana's going Turtles Under Threat. Yeah, bit of culture, bit of understanding the importance of animal welfare. Uh, yes, The Lizard from Outer Space. Someone there who enjoys a good sci-fi story. A good one. All right, excellent. So, lots and lots of choice. Now, what you will notice is that these books are all taken from the same range of readers from Macmillan. So these are books called Talk About Texts. I will be looking inside some of these books over the course of the week, and there will be information packs sent out to you throughout the week, which has some content from Turtles Under Threat as well. So if you are interested in Turtles Under Threat, keep an eye out for that one. So, what we can say about these is that they are all at different levels. There's also a mixture of fiction and non-fiction. And as we've already said, are we getting some free readers? You're getting part of a free reader. You're getting one free reader. But I'm sure that if you talk to some other people, you can probably get some samples from your local Macmillan representatives as well if you wanted to have a look at a few more titles. So yeah, different levels, different age grading. They're all for primary children, but of course, some of them are for younger primary children, some of them for older primary children, and a mixture of fiction and non-fiction as well. Because, as we have said, children are all different and all have different interests. Now, what should children read? Well, we've talked about interest, we've talked about age. We also need to talk about the purpose of reading. Now, what children need to be reading will vary depending on our purpose of as teachers. So, intensive reading and extensive reading call for different types of teaching materials and different types of reading materials. In the chat box, can anyone give me a definition of the difference between intensive and extensive reading? Can anybody give me a little summary in the chat box? Let's have a look. So yeah, Liliana has pointed out that also, when it comes to reading, there will also be factors depending on what we are covering in the curriculum as well. And certainly in classroom reading, this is something that is going to have an impact. All right. Okay. Lots of different things coming out. All right. Okay. Intensive for the curriculum, extensive for fun. I like that. Intensive, going in depth, extensive, knowing a lot about the subject. Ooh, almost. We can factor that in. Aha, intensive is academic reading, extensive out of the curriculum. hmm Okay, lots of people. Short text, long text. Okay. All right. Lots of different things that we can say. Let's take this a little bit deeper then. Let's start with intensive reading. So, as many of you have already said, intensive reading is detailed reading. It's focused reading. It's looking for very specific information. It's reading a text deeply. Often, this involves reading shorter texts. Although, as anyone who's ever done a university degree will understand, there is a lot of intensive reading that can happen with long texts as well. It's not always short texts. But in a primary classroom, it often is. Um, yeah, so involves reading in detail and it tends to be short text. It also tends to be guided. Because it's academic, it tends to have a purpose involved. So you'll be looking for specific things, trying to answer specific questions. Maybe we're reading intensively to identify a grammar point or a certain group of vocabulary items, or answering specific questions, looking for specific information. And there will be some sort of guidance that goes around that. So that might be the teacher providing the text to be read. It might be the teacher providing the questions that need to be answered. It might be the teacher providing extra backup information. And of course, intensive reading is related to specific learning aims. Now, on the other side of that, then, of course, we've got extensive reading. And the main aim of extensive reading is comprehension. Essentially, what we're talking about here is reading for pleasure, reading at your own time, at your own speed, reading the books that you choose to read to meet personal goals. Because of this, extensive reading could be any sort of text whatsoever. As we've already seen in our chat box, we all read, when we read extensively, we are all reading different things. What I read for fun, you don't, and vice versa. So, extensive reading is huge variety, but it's variety that we have chosen for ourselves. It is self directed. We read extensively when we have the time. If I were to ask you in the chat box, when do you read? Give me your answers. I'm going to put mine in there. I bet a lot of you have the same answer as me. There we go. Over the weekend, there's a good one. Before my answer there, before bed or on the train. There we go. Yep, before bed. Only when you're happy. Do you know what? I have the same thing. If I'm having a bad day, I don't like to read so much. If I'm relaxed and happy, that's when I will pick up a book. When I'm not busy, adulthood, very true. When we're not busy, ooh, when we travel, yeah. So we all have times that we like to read, um, and that's when we are extensive reading. So, what we can say then is that our intensive reading generally happens in the classroom, whereas extensive reading happens wherever we want it to. Now, if we've got the difference between intensive reading and extensive reading, as in reading for specific learning aims and reading for pleasure, what do you think that means for the difference in the academic English level of the books and the materials that we are reading? Um, in an intensive reading session, if my student is, let's say, A2 level student, should my student for intensive reading read a book at A1, a book at A2, or a book at B1? What's the best for intensive reading? Okay, oop, few people coming in straight away. A2, A2. Someone said +1. Oh, someone went +2. That's crazy. Um, and a few people are going down. Now, for intensive reading, for intensive reading, we should be reading at the level we are studying at because this will help us to learn. So if my student is studying at A2 and we are doing intensive English in the classroom, if we're doing intensive reading in the classroom, A2, reading at level. Often teachers will feel that, if we have a bit of guidance there, we can give the students more challenging texts. And I have done that myself. If the teacher's in the classroom, like we will, and we can give, then maybe we will occasionally give a little bit of work that's more challenging. Maybe you might give your B2 students a native English article to read from a newspaper. It will be above their level, but it will be above their level enough that they can have supported guidance and still understand. We don't want to go too far above because otherwise we get a problem. And that problem is the problem of being coming when reading becomes too difficult and too challenging, it becomes demotivating. So for intensive reading, we are looking at the same level, maybe a little bit above if we want to, but very rarely. Mainly, we should be reading at level. If you're studying A2 and we're reading intensively, give an A2 level text. Aha! So, same question, extensive reading. If my student is reading for pleasure, my student is in an A2 class. My student is at home reading for pleasure. Do we want to be reading an A2 book, an A1 book, or a B1 book? If we're reading for pleasure, okay, all right, we've got it. We've got it. If we are reading for pleasure, we should be reading below level. Now, why is that? Well, when we read extensively, when we read extensively, we are reading for pleasure. We are reading for enjoyment. When I read in English, I am reading a book, and it is not often that I need to look a word up in a dictionary if I'm reading for pleasure. If I'm reading a piece of fiction, sometimes it's going to happen, but more often than not, I can read and understand without a challenge in my native language most of the time. This is what we want for our students. When we are reading extensively, the focus is on developing reading fluency. You cannot develop reading fluency if every 5 minutes you need to stop reading. You cannot enjoy the book if every 5 minutes you need to stop reading. You will lose your concentration if every fifth word you are reading is a new word to you. You're not going to get better at reading fluency by reading books that are too challenging. Challenging reading happens guided in the classroom with the teacher. Extensive reading is independent reading, and it should be done for pleasure, and that means that it needs to be below the level. Now, now there we go. There's the automatic question from the teacher there. Do we assess reading level first? Yes, we absolutely should. How can we do that? Well, how did we know that question was coming next? How can we do that? Well, there's lots of things that we can do. Now, obviously, if you are teaching in an environment where you approximately know the level of your students, then you can guide them towards material that is able for them to understand. Which means that, for example, if I know that my students are studying at A1, then I'm going to be looking for really basic books. if they're studying at A2, then I can get some slightly more challenging full sentence books. If we are, if we're studying up the top end, we can, if I've got my students who's studying at B2 level, they can read books that interest them at A2, at B1, and up to some different levels. Extensive reading cannot challenge, otherwise, it's not going to bring the same benefits and the same encouragement of fluency throughout that experience. That does not mean students will not build vocabulary. What it means is that they will be able to understand from context. And this is key. This is absolutely key. And the question is, do natives differ from non-natives? No, you should always read at a level. If you're reading for pleasure, you should always read at a level that's easy for you. Um, the talk about textbooks, these are graded readers that are designed for different for first language speakers. They were written for first language English speakers, and of course, they are graded. It means that the children can read. Um, a side question: do the British children have higher levels in reading as it's their mother tongue? Well, reading in English, um, not necessarily. There are real challenges for literacy in first languages across the world. We know this. The challenges that children face, and we will be talking about these in a little while, are the same regardless of whether it's first language or second language. Now, a couple of people saying reading for pleasure needs higher level, otherwise it might be boring. All of the science says no. All of the studies, all of the engagements, it's not about the challenge of how difficult something is to read that makes it enjoyable. It's about the topic, it's about what you learn from it. Now, just because the language in the book is language that you already are aware of, just because the language is readable and understandable, does not mean you are not learning from it. The challenge to read is not what makes reading pleasurable. We can get some enjoyment from reading something difficult. If you read a really long, boring book, you might feel a little bit like, yay, I succeeded at the end of it. But it's not going to make you love reading. If reading is work, it will not make you love reading. What we're talking about here is reading to learn, and the challenge is not what gives you that. What gives you that is what you're learning from it. Books are a tool. They are not the goal. The books can teach us. So, while I may not need to stop every 5 minutes if I'm reading Grandpa Bruno, just because I know all of the words in the book, I've never seen them together in that way before. Um, a couple of people are saying that there are some audio problems. If you can hear me, say yes. If you can see me, say yes. If you are challenged by that, oh, good. Okay, so it's just a one-off. If you are having difficulties, feel free to jump out, jump back again. Okay, good. Always a panic. So yeah, um, we will be talking about this a lot over the next 4 sessions. Today is a beginning point, and our next session, which will be on Wednesday, is about classroom reading, and what we can do in there to help that. But when we're reading extensively, it needs to be for fun. So when we talk on next Monday about our reading at home, we will be focusing more on extensive reading. Motivation is important to everyone. We all need to be motivated to read. And I know full well that there are books on my bookshelf that I have read the first page of and gone, this book is not for me, and I've put it away. And then maybe 5 years later, I come back to it, and now is the time. Motivation is important to everybody when it comes to reading. So, we were asking the question of how can we make sure that the kids are reading at the right level? Well, if they're reading for guidance, for guided reading, then we're in the classroom and we know what level they are studying at. When they're reading extensively, a good technique that we can use, and we will be talking about some more techniques for this on next Monday, is to encourage them just to read the first page of the book. Pick up the first page of the book. Tell me, how many words in here do you not know? Are there any sentences that you don't understand? How difficult is this? If it feels too difficult, try a lower level and just do that spot check in that moment there. Right. So, is there a reading speed? There is. Well, there are many reading speeds. We have fast readers, we have slow readers. Um, yeah, the one thing that we can say is the more you read, the better you get at it. So, everybody starts to read slowly, and the more you read, the faster you get at it. And if the aim, yes, there we go. So Sarah said, if the aim is to develop love for reading among our young readers, absolutely. And we learn to love reading by reading. So before we get to questions, couple of things that we need to talk about. And these are the four main barriers to reading. Obviously, at the top, we have put special educational needs. There are, of course, for every teacher across the world, we've all met students who have challenges. Some of those challenges will cause problems with reading, whether those are, um, letter processing special educational needs like dyslexia, which bring their own challenges, whether they are other challenges that students face, such as concentration spans, ADHD, etc. All of these things can have an impact. And if you are working with children with special educational needs, hopefully you are in an environment where there is backup and support available to you. Um, I am not a special educational needs specialist, and I'm not going to sit here and give you sort of this is what you need to do. That is not my place. But what I can say is that there is help and support that is widely available to help that. This is a real challenge. Um, but it is a challenge that can be overcome. And thankfully, it's a challenge that teachers, educators, and specialists are getting better at with every passing year. If I think back to when I was in primary school, there was not a lot of support around. Like, children today are in a better position now. So as long as we can get access to that, then you know we've got every success available to students with the right support. So it is a barrier, but it's not a barrier that cannot be broken. The other motivational barrier, of course, has already come up in conversation. Motivation to read. We said right at the very beginning, is it true that there is no such thing as a child that hates reading? And I think a lot of us agreed that if we are given the right materials, that motivation will come. So, how do we build that motivation in the classroom? Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I certainly have mine, and I will be talking about them throughout these sessions over the next few weeks. Motivation often comes from choice, but it also comes through modeling and recognizing reading as an important skill. So we're going to be talking about that quite a lot as well over the course of the week. Comprehension, of course, is a barrier. For any of you that work in phonics and the mechanical side of learning to read, um, you'll often hear this complaint is that phonics does not teach comprehension. They go hand in hand. It's very easy to think that if we teach phonics, children will learn to read, but they are not the same thing. It's like learning how a clock works and learning to tell the time are two different things. Like, you know um comprehension will not automatically come by teaching phonics. We need to teach phonics and comprehension. And when it comes to comprehension, that's what we're saying about levels here. We need to be able to understand not just the individual words but the message of the book as well. So decoding in and of itself does not help comprehension. It will help you to understand what the word is. It will not help you understand what the word means. This is why we need to teach both. If we are teaching phonics and phonics alone, it will not make a child read. We need to be able to, you know, encourage that comprehension as well. And the best way to do this is through questioning. And we're going to be talking a lot about that tomorrow. And then, of course, finally, the challenge of fluency. So, what can we do? Well, um, which of these, I will ask you, one, two, three, or four, is the challenge that you most often face with students that don't enjoy reading in your classrooms or enjoy reading for themselves? Which of these challenges is the biggest? Fluency, 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 comprehension, motivation. Phonics makes them distracted. Ah, yes. Two, four. Yeah, motivation and fluency. All right, great. So, how the rest of this week will go. In Wednesday's session and in Thursday's session, we are going to be focusing mainly on the ideas of motivation, comprehension, and building reading fluency in the classroom. And then in our final session next Monday, we will be looking about that fluency and that love of reading at home to support learners. So if you are interested in finding a few solutions to these problems, then I really do hope you join us for the rest of the week. For now, we have a few minutes left, so if you have any questions that you want to bring up, feel free to pop them in the chat box. I may tell you that you will get your question answered in another session, but if it's something that I can answer right now, I will happily do so. Um, so there is no session tomorrow. There was originally going to be a session tomorrow, but unfortunately I have had a schedule clash and we decided that we didn't want to risk me being late for the session, so we are going to move the session from tomorrow to Wednesday. So we're doing Wednesday, Thursday this week, and then Monday next week. Okay. What is reading anxiety? Oh my goodness. Reading anxiety is something that I have had a real issue with in my second language, which is Turkish. And like reading in Turkish for me really just brought out the worst anxiety. But I mean, like any anxiety, it is something that is an emotional, a chemical reaction to certain triggers, let's say, and sometimes one of those triggers can be reading for some people. We'll talk about it a little bit more on I think in tomorrow's session. Oh, well, Wednesday's session, sorry. We will be addressing that, so it will come up. I do hope you join. How to overcome it? Patience, 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 and support, and guidance, and comfort, and making sure that you're being given the space to come to things, not to force it. it's a tricky one, and it takes time, but love, comfort, support, and access to different things is it a disorder. I'm not a doctor. I know it's a real thing. I don't know if it's a disorder. So, any other questions or comments coming up? Let me have a quick scan. Ooh, how do videos and social media affect reading motivation? I think it's I think it's different to it's different for different students, isn't it? I think there are some people that love to read and play video games or spend time on social media. And just because they're online doesn't mean they're not reading. It's important to remember that. Um, but I think what we've generally seen is that, as social media has grown, as the internet has grown, our attention spans have all reduced a little bit. um, I'm not I'm not, again, I'm not an expert on this in any way, shape, or form, so I couldn't possibly give you any scientific background or data. I can only give you observational data. Um, I think it's a case of reading has become often deprioritized, and it's not something that students think about. Print versus electronic really doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. I like a physical book myself. um, but I have a digital e-reader. I read books digitally. I read online. I read on my phone. If we're reading, it's good. It doesn't really matter. Although I think it is important for young learners to learn how books work. To understand the feel of a book, to understand how to turn a page. Um, and certainly, if you're coming from a culture or a country with a different alphabet, or a different reading method. So for example, for Arabic speakers, reading from right to left. Japanese is read vertically often. So I think with young learners, it's important for to get them to actually read, have a physical book, know what a book feels like. Yes, there will be loads and loads and loads of advice for all sorts of readers this week. I promise, but not this day. Yeah, come along to the session on Wednesday for lots and lots of advice. All right. You have a library in your classroom, however few participants. What to do to get more learners involved? Oh my God, come to the sessions on Wednesday and Thursday, and I promise I will answer all of those questions. Hello,
Hi,
you're back.
Charlotte. Thank you so much.
Hi.
That was great. That was a great start to a week of sessions, or 3 more sessions at least. Yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I'm a big reader myself. So,
What do you like reading?
I like a good fiction. I like a good bit of fiction, something that you can't put down.
Yeah.
But I do, yeah, something, a page turner is always good. And I do like a bit of non-fiction as well. But sometimes I like something that's a bit more exciting. Although non-fiction can be exciting. So
It can be.
yeah.
It can be.
But yeah,
Right.
that was a great session. I agree as well with your point about print or digital. I think as long as you're reading, I think that's great. So yeah, thank you so much to everyone for joining us today, and giving up your time. We hope to see you at the remainder of the sessions for this series. So after the session today, you'll automatically receive a certificate. And then in the next 24 hours, we'll send you a link to watch the session again and share this with your colleagues, along with the slides from Charlotte's presentation. Please do, as Charlotte said, join us on Wednesday for our next session, which will cover reading in the classroom at the same time, so 4:30 BST. And if you haven't registered, you can find all of the links on the Macmillan International Curriculum social media pages, or drop
All
us
of
an
which are there
email.
on the screen.
Yeah, all the picture on the screen, exactly. I had a window covering that, so thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I've just seen a question about when you will receive your certificate, so you'll receive that straight after the session. You should have an email with that attached. And we'll look forward to seeing you and at the rest of the week, and enjoy the
And
rest
I'm
of your
gonna have to
days.
sort out some sort of window covering to stop me looking like a glowing ghost
Looks
woman.
lovely.
I'm so
You'll be
lit.
tanned by Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, everyone, and we'll see you later on in the week.
Yes,
Thank
have
you
a
very
great
much.
evening. Thank you
Thank
all.
you, Charlotte.
Bye.
Bye.